If you're just joining us, this is Good Morning Nigeria. Water, no doubt, is an important amenity for human survival, hence the efforts of government to ensure its availability. Oyeyemi Ajayi in this background report chronicles efforts being made by the government towards water supply, sanitation and hygiene in the last 5 years.
Water is life. This remains the most common and succinct description of the importance of this basic amenity to all living things. Late Afrobeat maestro Fela Anikulapo Kuti melodiously puts water no get enemy, defining the living pattern of many, with some living in excess while many lack access to potable water, especially in the rural areas. Nigeria is a party to the United Nations Declaration of the Right to Water, which entitles everyone living in Nigeria to sufficient, affordable, safe and acceptable water for personal and domestic uses, with the lead agency, Federal Ministry of Water Resources, on the forefront. Goal 6 of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDG, is on clean water and sanitation, and this talks about the equal distribution of water in Nigeria. In 2015, the climax of series of brainstorming sessions is the political will by President Muhammadu Buhari to turn the tide of events in the wash sector around positively, with much targets in the rural areas, majorly suffering from waterborne diseases such as cholera, typhoid, among others. On the 8th of October 2018, Nigeria declared a state of emergency on the water, sanitation and hygiene wash sector, with the chief aim of mobilizing states and local governments as well as development partners for a turnaround of the sector. It is believed that achieving more equitable provision of wash services in Nigeria will require redirecting the little available resources to focus more on provision of wash facilities in rural areas and the need to continue to subsidize these services in rural areas. On the front burner of the government is the strive for making Nigeria an open defecation-free country, after being among the major countries on the forefront of open defecation, with a self-challenging target of 2025 to stop about 47 million people said to be practicing open defecation in the country. So, how do Nigerians assess the Water Resources Ministry, especially in the coordination of development of wash sector? What more still needs to be done to ensure the sector harness the resources and even distribution of water across the country? These are some questions the guest already seated will be discussing shortly.
Many thanks to Oyeyemi Ajayi for that background. With us in the Abuja studios to discuss this issue, let's welcome Engineer Suleiman Adamu as Honorable Minister of Water Resources. Honorable Minister, pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, Nigerians.
Also here with us in the studios is Miss Evelyn Mere, who is Country Director of WaterAid. Ms. Mere, pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigerians.
Okay.
And joining us from our Jos studio is Saad Bello, Honorable Commissioner for Water Resources and Energy, Plateau State. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Also joining us via Skype from Canada is the Chief of Water, Sanitation and Hygiene, UNICEF, Zaid Georgi. Good to have you join us.
Good morning.
All right. Once again, we'll welcome all our guests to this conversation. But as always, we'll begin the program with the Honorable Minister of Water Resources. Happily, we've had you from time to time on Good Morning Nigeria, and you've also had the benefit of being in office since 2015, in November 2015, when the President inaugurated his cabinet. So give us a sense of what we have seen in the water sector under the presidency of Muhammadu Buhari, although we know that the key responsibility of the federal government is bulk water supply management.
Thank you. Good morning once again. I think progress has been made to a large extent. First of all, we came in at a time when the Millennium Development Goals, we're just winding up, and Nigeria has subscribed to the new Sustainable Development Goals, and we we took an assessment of what the situation was, why we failed to meet the MDGs, and came out with a program with particular reference to the rural areas, because we realized at that time that 50% of the rural population didn't have adequate access, if any access at all. So we introduced a program that we called Partnership for Expanded Water Supply, Sanitation and Hygiene, which is PWASH, as we call it. Of course, we also inherited quite a number of projects in the ministry, 116 in all, but 43 of them water supply schemes, which we've been able to complete quite a number of them. Some started way back in 1992, like the Zobe water supply project that is supplying Katsina Metropolis, which we have completed now. After all the the terrible history behind it. So, and the recent survey we conducted, the WASH norm, we call the National Routine Mapping, in association with the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, indicate that at least since that time we've moved up a little bit in terms of water, sanitation, and hygiene. Now we have a coverage at 70%, up 2% from 68%, and we've been able to reduce ODF, open defecation, by about 1 million people. It's now about 46 million people. But bearing in mind that population always keeps rising, I think it's quite substantial. But that is not to say that we're celebrating it. Of course, we're happy that the indices are moving up or down, as the case may be, but it just tells us that there is more work that needs to be done. Of course, we introduced new policies. Also, we got the National Water Resources Policy approved by the Federal Executive Council in September 2016. Under that policy, of course, it has always been, but we revised it and put on some strategies along with it. We have the federal government commitment to support states by up to 50% funding for rural water supply projects, and then 30% commitment on urban water schemes to support the states. And for the first time, we actually went on to put a budget line in the national budget of the Ministry of Water Resources for that particular aspect of urban water supply. Of course, we've had other schemes in addition to PWASH, like we've introduced a program for the IDPs, out of which I think by now would have done close to 200 schemes in the Northeast and other places. So these are some of them, and we've gone ahead, we went ahead to, like I said, complete some of the ongoing projects. Like you mentioned in your opening statement, the Central Ogbia Water Supply Scheme, and quite a number of others. We also reprioritized some of the projects because they've been moribund, like Zungeru Wushishi Water Supply Project, like Water Supply Project, like the Benin, the Owena Dam, where we have a dam and a water treatment plant to supply Akure, and nothing was done. And we encouraged the new government to push forward. They're negotiating a loan now to be able to do the transmission and distribution. So we have introduced a new partnership with the states, and that's exactly why we were able to finish Katsina with the Zobe Water Supply Project as well. We rescoped the projects, and then we took certain portions, the most difficult ones and the ones that are the quick wins to be done by the federal government, and allowed some of the components to the states. We have now an MOU with, in addition to Katsina, we have with Kaduna State, we have with Niger State, we have with Ogun State, and we're looking at others as well. So quite a number of things going on, to be able to push and get the things going. Then we also are talking with the World Bank to support the rural water supply initiative that we have under PWASH, and also to support urban water schemes as well. We're looking at a provision of about $700 million, out of which a portion will go to the rural water supply and sanitation aspect, and then we would like to create some model cities As you know, one of the disheartening things about water supply, number one, in 1992, 30% of the Nigerian population was enjoying pipe-borne water. As of 2015, it had dropped to 7%. That's one. Number two, even the existing water schemes, based on the WASH norm study that we just validated, only 35%, the schemes are operating at 35% capacity, All the entire schemes in the country, on average, they are operating at 35% installed capacity, which is terrible. And then there's not a single city in this country, not a single one, that enjoys pipe-borne water 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we want to create models. If we're able to get these funds, we'll ask the states to compete, and then hopefully we'll get some cities, maybe about 6, that we can look at the entire water supply requirements from source to treatment, to transmission, to storage and distribution. So that if we can create these model cities that can have complete coverage, and then hopefully there will be another incentive in addition to PWASH and all this the government is doing for state governments to begin to invest more in water supply, because the key problem now is that states are not really investing as they should.
Yes, I was actually going to talk about rural areas. We'll be talking, the federal government is concerned about urban and rural areas. The rural areas are situated in the states, and if you've been having conferences, State Commission of Water Resources have been coming to Abuja to attend these conferences. How is it that they are not really into the federal government's initiative for water?
Well, it's about political will, number one, and it's also about the structure of the country. We have a federal structure. Some states are governed by the ruling party at federal level, or governing party, as we like to say it, in our government, and some states are governed by the opposition. So, and also, there are different individuals, different governors have different priorities. But the truth is, without maximum political will, as has been demonstrated by President Buhari when he declared a state of emergency on the wash sector in November 2018, we cannot go far. If a state government does not see water and sanitation as its priority, obviously there won't be sufficient funding to channel its money where it should. But I've been appealing to states that let us start with the building blocks. Water is life. Everything about life came out of water. Why don't you invest a lot of money, get rid of the problem, although it's not going to go, but you can put in a lot of infrastructure, a lot of investment that will ensure that there is maximum or optimum coverage, and then go out and deal with other things. Water has direct connection with health, for instance. If you now invest more on water and sanitation, you can juggle a little bit with your health budget. I wouldn't want anybody to touch education, for instance. And then a lot of money is being spent on vanity, so to speak. Spending money on dualizing roads, building edifices, beautifying roundabouts at the expense of this basic commodity, which is water. So if we do not prioritize it as governments, state commissioners cannot do anything because they report to their governors. So at the end of the day, we need political will at the highest level.
I just wondered, Honorable Minister, incidentally, this is an issue that has often come up whenever we have this conversation with you, in terms of what we are saying, shall we say now, in the downstream sector of water supply. The federal government takes care of the upstream, which is bulk water, but we are not seeing transmission and reticulation for end use. It's an embarrassment, what you just said a while ago, that there is no city in Nigeria where people have access to uninterrupted water supply, 24 hours in a week, and 24 hours in a day, and 7 days in a week. So people are going to then ask themselves, when you're talking, therefore, about water and what the federal government is doing, the end user satisfaction doesn't appear to be there. So how have you tried to drive the Water Council Water Council, of course, will explain that to our viewers, what it means. To be sure that, look, as you are walking upstream, the downstream, you also have satisfactory efforts being made. I know you have already complained about, unfortunately, the lethargic response of the subnational entities.
Yeah. Well, the council you're talking about is the National Council on Water Resources,
Right.
where we meet every year with the state commissioners. These things always, that's the highest policy body for the country. And we meet there, we exchange ideas, and we drive our agenda. But again, it's about implementation. Right now, over the years, federal government has built over 240 dams. So mostly, the first priority under the National Water Policy is we give priority to drinking before any other thing, and then irrigation, hydropower, and the rest come in. But even for drinking purpose, you see that many dams have been lying fallow, and dams have a life. So if a dam has been built 40, 50 years ago, it's a small dam, it's already reaching the end of its life. So the dams have just been lying there. Communities have been fishing. Some people have been doing informal irrigation, because some dams are also specifically meant for irrigation. Of course, when there is a dam, the water aspect will be there always. People will be looking for it. So dam and water supply and irrigation in particular. But it was meant for the subnational government to now, the federal government having done its bit, they were supposed to now extend and, tap into that water. In fact, the regulations even provide that state governments are even supposed to pay the federal government a certain amount more money for the use of that raw water. That hasn't happened. They have not exploited it, so the dams have been there. Some people have taken advantage and been doing aquaculture and so on. Some dams have been a calamity because they ended up destroying livelihoods, farms and livelihoods. But what we have under the Buhari administration, and President Buhari made this statement, that henceforth, federal government investment in any water supply, sanitation, hygiene program must be accompanied by a commensurate, effort on the part of the state. So it's no longer federal government coming and investing its money, and then after it's done the projects and gone, nobody takes care of it. Recall, since the 80s or the 70s, federal government has been involved in many national borehole drilling programs. And after a while, you find out that all those boreholes are not working. Even for states and local governments and the communities themselves to maintain these schemes, they don't take ownership. So why should the federal government continue to dish out money like that, and then there is no commensurate appreciation? The way to appreciate it is to put it to use and to hold it dearly. But they've not been doing it. You cited the Central Ogbia Water Supply Project, for instance. This is a case in point that, federal government invested 6 billion naira on that project to support 13 communities in Bayelsa State. I went in September 2016, the first project I commissioned, because when I came, it was like a low-hanging fruit to say, okay, let's quickly finish it and get rid of it, hand it over to the states. We did that. A year later, I asked NTA crew that is attached to my office, please go and check what is happening there. The plant was under lock and key. When we asked what was the problem, we were told that the state government was complaining that they cannot afford to buy diesel, on a monthly basis to run the generators. So when you see all this kind of thing, I'm sorry, it's so frustrating, You see money being invested for a certain purpose, and you are not getting the result. So that's why we're saying now, look, it's going to be a two-way traffic. Federal government is no longer going to put its money and just leave it like that, just do things. Your state must also take certain responsibility. So that's why you now see us signing MOUs with the states. Even recently, we signed with Nasarawa State. In the MOU, it's clearly spelled out what each party is supposed to do and when. So I hope that both parties will respect these MOUs, and it's like I said, it's just a question of putting your priority where you should. you know. If a government makes a commitment or the government understands that water is the most important thing to do, I think it will not be a problem. And let's bear in mind that water, you know, is consumed. The investment you must make must be commensurate with the population, you know, the trend in population growth. You cannot have a scheme, for instance, what we have today, most of the schemes are probably 20, 30 years outdated. It's for a 30-year population, and the same people or more people, double that population is still struggling with that 30-year-old scheme, you know. And then the scheme is not even operating at full capacity. It's operating at 35% or 30% capacity. So it's double jeopardy. So we still have a lot to do.
You know, we cannot talk about water without talking about climate change, which is very, very important because of the shrinking arable farming land, insecurity all over. So what are the critical steps Nigerians need to take to ensure that almost every Nigerian has water and is protected from, you know, climate change?
Well, the thing is we have to manage our water resources. You know, luckily, for the past, I think since 1995, we've had a National Water Resources Master Plan, but it was never implemented to the letter. It was reviewed in 2013 to begin operating in 2015. So what we're doing now in the ministry, in accordance with the roadmap that I instituted in 2016, is going forward as much as possible. We must implement those projects that have been identified by the Water Resources Master Plan, because that will safeguard the water resources that we have in the country. We're a very lucky country. We have per capita 1,800 cubic meters per year. That's every individual. If you divide the entire water resource by the population, and even though we have rivers Niger and Benue, the bulk of the contribution is actually from rainfall that falls within the country. So we're a very lucky country. Our biggest problem is how to harness and manage. From 1973, when we had the drought, we've been able. That was when it kind of catalyzed us into building all these reservoirs and so on and so forth. And we have quite a number of dams that have been very, very helpful. But again, climate change and our own shortcomings, you know, environmental degradation, deforestation, and so on, have made our rivers to be silted up, and they are the main channel that carry the water into our reservoirs, because dams are built along rivers. So it's quite a huge challenge. So we need to go back to catchment management, and that is essentially why we need a robust water resources law in the country, with catchment management that provides for these catchment management units, and that in every catchment we'll get to know what is going on, and we can do a lot of management. One of the things we are doing now is we are going to collaborate with the Ministry of Environment on this tree planting, so that we can at least begin to salvage the watershed. But it's a long-term thing. It took years to get to this degradation, and it's going to take us years to get back. But climate change is real. Some we can control, some we can't. Some things we can control and some things we can't, honestly. But at least we should be able to have some adaptation and resilience measures. And we have a robust climate change unit in our ministry that is looking at all those issues.
Okay, right. Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. In terms of tree planting, we had the Honourable Minister of Environment with us some days ago, and he was also talking about the number of trees that they are seeking to plant under the Great Green Wall scheme. But let's go over to Jos, where we earlier introduced Saad Bello, who is the Honorable Commissioner for Water Resources in Plateau State. Saad Bello, you listen to the Honorable Minister, and the numbers, to say the least, are really appalling, that there is no city in Nigeria where people have access to uninterrupted water supply 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Plus the fact that, the percentage of the population nationwide that has access to public water supply is just about 7%. And the problem would appear to be with the downstream sector of the water supply agenda, namely the failure of subnational entities to get into this. I'm not asking you to self-indict, but quite clearly, I'm sure you speak with your colleagues in other states, especially when you interact at the National Water Council. Why is it that we have difficulty exploiting bulk water already supplied by the federal government and then just channel it last mile to end users for domestic or industrial purposes at the state and local government levels?
Well, thank you very much for this question. I've listened carefully to the Honorable Minister. He has actually nipped the issue at the bud. The analysis here in the state, in Plateau State, is that it confirms what the Honorable Minister says. When you look at our operation capacity to provide, especially urban water, the operation capacity, we are currently operating at less than 21%. A lot of reasons could be attributed to this. One most important is that the facility is almost going moribund. These are facilities in my own state. There were the water board facility were put in around 1972, 1973. And virtually very little effort is being made over the years to revitalize these facilities, and therefore you do not expect optimum yield from this facility. That is one of the factors. Secondly, even the water usage. Water is life. Water is something that is being looked as a social service. Over the years, people abuse the use of water. People do not have concern for maintaining the facility around their environment, and have a lukewarm attitude even to the payment of this water. So these and other factors has made it possible for us to see ourselves where we are today. This is not an issue just in Plateau State. It is almost in virtually almost all the states. We've interacted during the Water Council with my colleagues, and we share experiences. And the experience is somehow bad sometimes. But it is not a bad story all through, because this particular administration, when it came on board in 2015, made very quick response in the water sector. It imbibed the reforms. The federal government has actually made it very clear for us to look at the reform opportunities that we have. The administration embarked on the reform, and the reform is actually yielding both great changes, both in the institutional and at the sectoral level. Let me just give an example. The policies, the water policies that we are implementing were actually having some challenges that we cannot actually deliver on what we want to deliver. And therefore, that underscores the importance of institutionalizing the reform. Secondly, the laws. Water, as I said, water has been like a public utility that people should get as a social service. Yes, it is expected that water is a right that you should get as a social service, but the provision, the way from the raw water to the treatment, to the transmission, to the distribution, you realize that it is virtually impossible for government to continue the way it started, and therefore we have to inject the spirit of corporatization. We need to bring some ideas that will make the water boards to make, to engage themselves in some, to behave like a corporate entity, where the emphasis will be business. We are not saying it is like privatizing the water sector, but we are actually looking at trying to see that some aspects of the water production should be commercialized. New ideas should be injected, both in terms of introducing metering, so that it makes people pay for the services they receive at minimal rate. That will go a long way in providing us the opportunity to have water availability, water sustainability, and actually it will make the system produce safe water for consumption. These are some of those things that the states need to really put in place to make the system change. Another aspect that the states also need to complement the effort of the federal government is in terms of budgetary allocation. We need to make substantial budgets for the water sector in order to achieve the challenge of water availability, both in the urban area, in the small towns, as well as in the rural communities. Without appropriate budgets and political will to release what is contained in the budget, I think the story will continue to be a lamentable situation. Here in the state, as I said, we've made effort to embark on the reform, and it is also being backed by political will, because in the 2020 budget, the State Ministry of Water Resources and Energy has the highest budget, and about 21.6% of the budget goes to the ministry, out of which about 18.2% is to the water sector. This is a very laudable and commendable effort, and we have tried to see how we can juxtapose the budgetary allocations that we have and the partnership that we have with the federal government and with other development partners, so that we can bring within the shortest possible time the desired deliverables in terms of water provision in both the urban cities and the small towns, as well as the rural communities. The law, we have tried to also go into to repeal the old laws. His Excellency has graciously signed the bill that was passed, and we have gazetted the law just last month. The law has made water, sectorized water into three main sectors: the urban water, the small town, and the rural communities, the rural water supply and sanitation agencies. And we have also embarked, we've known that you cannot achieve all these ones without the cooperation of the local governments. And therefore, we've made a priority, and we've institutionalized WASH as a department in our local governments, so that whatever is being delivered in terms of rural water, it will be closely monitored to ensure that the facility is maintained, to ensure that maintenance is being done in collaboration with the communities that are enjoying the facility. These are some of the measures that is being put in place, and we are carefully implementing these measures to ensure that we achieve the target of sustainable water to at least 70% by the year 2030. That is what we are hoping to achieve in the state. We want to improve on the moribund facilities and enhance the delivery of services to the people of Plateau State. I will also want to quickly put in my weight behind the Honorable Minister, where he is lamenting the situation where the federal government does its own responsibility by providing bulk water through the provision of dams to the states, and then the states abandoning. We have a very big regional water scheme that we have already taken over the treatment plant, and hopefully, if not for the COVID-19, would have taken over the dam.
Okay, thank you so much, Honorable Commissioner, back in the studio. Country Director, Water Aid, Evelyn Mera, you've heard from the Minister, you heard from the Commissioner. The subnationals are not really there with the federal government on water supply, which is very important. And can you give us an assessment from your office of the 5 years of this administration in water provision to Nigerians?
Thank you very much. Let me start by saying that for us in the development sector, the present administration provides what we can only call a dream a dream sector a dream context in which to work. You have the policy direction already set, and then you have government at the federal level taking the lead. We're always pushing for government to take the lead, and government is now taking the lead. They've set the policy direction. They declared a state of emergency, saying to everyone, we're prioritizing this sector. We realize much hasn't been done in the past. We're ready to address that now and ensure we meet our target for 2030. And then the Clean Nigeria Use the Toilet campaign has been launched. We held a closed meeting in Sweden asking the international community to support the Nigerian government by investing, bringing technical know-how, partnerships. And all of that is bearing fruit. So at the federal level, there's so much happening, and it's enabled us to key in effectively in terms of our influencing approach. Because initially, water aid was focused on delivering services. But if you look at the Nigerian population, anything we do will be a drop in the ocean. So we decided, okay, let's focus on influencing government to do the right thing. But government on its own, based on lobbying and advocacy done by actors in the sector, declared a state of emergency, launched the National Action Plan, the PE wash is in place, and then the Clean Nigeria Use the Toilet campaign. And now Order 009 has been signed by the government, making sure that people end open defecation. So at the federal level, a lot is happening. At the state level, what we're trying to do is then make sure we cascade what government is doing at the federal level to the states. We're working in 3 key states, and what we do is to build on states that have political will. One of those states is Bauchi. Bauchi, following what the federal government has done, has already developed its own draft state action plan. It's increased investment in the sector, and then it's working with us to launch what we call the Clean Family Campaign, which is Bauchi State's version of the Clean Nigeria Use the Toilet campaign. So Bauchi State is really open for reform. We're working with them using the building blocks approach. So we've looked at policy. They've reviewed their policy. They've reviewed the law. It's now with the State House of Assembly for passage. We've looked at coordination. We created a coordination platform for key actors from the State Ministry of Environment, State Ministries of Water Resources, Information, Women Affairs, all of them to come together along with the donors to share ideas to make sure everyone is integrating effectively. The state is also they've already increased investment. The budgetary allocation has been increased. And then we've worked with them to do one key thing, which a lot of states are missing, planning. What we did with them is to support them to do a database of all the facilities that are in the state. So with that database, you're able to understand what facilities that need to be replaced, what facilities that need to be rehabilitated, what you need for operations and maintenance, and where you need to do new capital investments. And then when we did that in one local government area called Kerfi, the Bauchi state government replicated that across all the local governments for water. So now they have an investment plan for water. Now the next step is to do the same for sanitation. So once you have that, you've planned, then that means you can know where your money is going, then you can invest more, then you can implement, then you can monitor, and each year you assess to see whether you're making progress. So that Bauchi is showing a lot of political will and willingness to key into what the federal government is doing. That's at the level of the sector improvement. Then in terms of the service delivery, we're working with them to show the best practices. If we're building a water facility, we're coming to show what the standards are, what the quality standards should be. And at the end of the day, their capacity is increased, and then we're working with them to create space for the public sector to come in, and then for the private sector to come in, and then have the state water agencies become much more commercialized in terms of thinking, and then making sure tariffs, become the conversation that everybody is having. Then at the level of the users, which is the citizens, we've brought together citizens in what we call Vote for Wash campaign. It's like an animation approach, making citizens tell politicians, if you're not going to prioritize wash, we will not vote for you. So the governor himself, the present governor, signed the pledge card that he will prioritize wash, which is what we're now following up to say, keep the promise that you made. And then we're also working with citizens through the hygiene behavior change campaign, because citizens have responsibility. So through the hygiene behavior change campaign, you change hygiene behaviors, tell them you appeal to the dignity in the person, so they themselves determine that they will not defecate in the open. And then they begin to demand for toilets. So, and then also after demanding for toilets, you must be willing to pay your own tariff so that you understand your full responsibility as a citizen in making sure the wash sector is functional. Then we're also working, so that's creating demand through hygiene behavior change. For the supply side, we're then working with the private sector to develop a sanitation market economy, whereby looking at various actors, those who produce cheap toilets that households can afford, those who do wholesaling, those who do retailing, those who provide financing for small businesses, and then looking at how you bring all of them together to, to enable that part of the market function. So Bauchi State is showing that interest to do that. The same with Enugu, they've declared a state of emergency. We're working with them through an interministerial committee to develop a state action plan. They had what we call a fecal sludge management crisis in the state. We've worked with them through an urban sanitation study to show them how to manage fecal sludge and turn waste to wealth. Plateau states, like the commissioner was talking about, gazetted their laws. So we're planning to hold a town hall meeting with the citizens, the government, to say, how do we move this forward? All of us have to put our hands together. The main thing is that the federal government has shown the way. They've created incentives. There's a watch fund. Once that fund is fully provided for, you can key into it based on the actions you've taken at the level of the state that show that you know what it is you're doing. Enugu as well has reviewed their policy and their law. So what we want to do is to look at those states that are willing, use them as models to show other states that this can be done. And then if they're also open to our support, we can be there to work with them. And I do believe progress is being made. We've just brought 1 million people out of open defecation. That's a lot. By the time this picks up, the private sector begins to invest significantly in toilets, in managing fecal sludge, in turning fecal sludge into fertilizer. The whole wash sector will come alive, and I'm not saying this just because the minister is here, but you have a square peg in a square hole. Who knows what needs to be done? Who's providing that direction? So it really looks good. And we are in the last mile to 2030, this is the last 10 years. And this is what we're calling in water aid, accelerating to 2030. And I believe it can be done. And even with COVID-19 coming here, it's given a new sense of urgency to what needs to be done. We've developed guidelines to support the WASH COVID-19 response. And we're saying, as a matter of urgency, start repairing broken down water facilities, expand the ones that are there, look at water quality, making sure sanitation facilities are everywhere, making sure wash facilities are in healthcare centers, promoting hygiene behavior change, distributing hygiene packs. This is an emergency response. But what it does is that it now sets the tone. Once the emergency starts to kind of temper down into recovery, then it means the National Action Plan can be given effect much more easily at the level of the states. I
was just wondering, you have 3 states that, according to you, have shown the political will. Bauchi, of course, you spoke about glowingly, Enugu and Plateau. Did you meet with a great deal of resistance from the other 33 states?
Not necessarily. The interesting thing is some of those states are actually coming to us. Cross River State has come to say that they really want to expand the sanitation economy because they're looking for a way to create jobs. So we are working with them to look at how we do the hygiene behavior change campaign to create demand, and then work with artisans, producers, distributors, wholesalers to create that market. So using job creation as an entry point, you find that government is willing to come on board. And Ekiti State as well, we're going to be working with them on the COVID-19 response, Oyo State, Kaduna State. So a lot of the states are willing to do things. Sometimes what they just need is somebody to come and show technical know-how, maybe do a small model from which they can learn and then replicate at scale. So this is the approach that we're using, and we're finding that they are responding. What we need is really, at the end of the day, government playing its role, regulation, showing policy direction, and then creating an enabling environment for the private sector to come in. Once you mention profits, jobs, they will take over. And then government just sits back and does the proper thing it's meant to do. And I believe there's hope, and we will get there.
So the peculiarity of the Northeast now, where we have a lot of IDPs and, desert encroachment and all that, what kind of synergy have you been having with that section of the country?
We're actually about to start a project funded by USAID on small town wash. So it's looking at recovery. A lot of the communities have been devastated by conflict. And when you have conflict, it destroys everything in its path, water facilities included. So what we're doing is to rebuild water facilities for small towns. Small towns are the places where a lot of unplanned settlements happen. So what you do there is to make sure that you rehabilitate and you expand. And then you make sure that there's adequate water to enable recovery. And then that builds the foundation for recovery and economic development and minimizes the resurgence of conflict. So that's the kind of approach we're using for the Northeast, looking at recovery, helping state governments to rebuild, looking at policies and laws, building capacity, creating that enabling environment for the government to then do what it's meant to do.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Mayor. Just to indicate that our Skype connection to Zaid Georgie has been disrupted, so we can't immediately have him join us in this conversation. Of course, he's joining us from Canada, even though normally his duty post is here in Nigeria. We've had the privilege of having him in our studio sometime in the past. Once our engineers sort out the connection, we'll return to him. But let's come back to the studios and bring in the Honorable Minister of Water Resources. As part of the policy framework, as part of the new idea, if you like, of managing the water sector, one key point, and I'm happy that the Honorable Commissioner for Water in Plateau raised this, and we've had the privilege of also discussing this with you, but not in detail. What has the federal government tried to push in terms of the economics of water? Because I'm sure that in pushing the economics of water, you're going to confront a great deal of resistance. People believe, on the one hand, it's a social service. People believe also that it's the gift, from the heavens, because we have, abundant rainfall, and we have rivers and all that. And I'm sure that if any of your less privileged neighbors were to come to you to say, look, I want to fetch a bucket of water, and you scare them away, the next thing they will say that you are a very bad man. I just wanted to go and fetch a bucket of water, and Oga said that we shouldn't enter his compound. So, but we know that we are unlikely to make sufficient progress in this day and age without focusing on the economics of water as part of the whole agenda of managing the water sector. How is your ministry driving this, and how is the president backing you up?
Well, a lot has been going on. Let me say that, yes, water is a basic human right, but water has a cost. The major thrust of our water policy is that water is an economic commodity and must be paid for. It is clearly stated in our program. That's why, in our policy document. So I had mentioned earlier that states are supposed to be paying for the bulk water that they tap, and then they're supposed to treat, sell to the public, and get to recover their costs. But this has not been happening. First of all, we will need to have a strong regulation, and that's why one of the main reasons why we need the Water Resources Bill to be passed into law, because there's a provision there for adequate regulation. When we have adequate regulation like we have in the power sector, then we'll be talking. We've also been doing quite a lot. We've identified the need for all these things. Even our PWASH program has a component that we call Water and Sanitation Entrepreneurship, a provision, because we know people can make money out of water. In the last 2 years, the World Water Day celebration, it was about water and jobs. And it was indicated, the UN had a study that almost 70% of the jobs in the world are associated with water. So water is very, very important. But let me also say that most of the things that we've been doing with World Bank support and other development partners support is this idea of corporatization of state water agencies. Bear in mind, and I want to say it again for the umpteenth time, the federal government is not the business of federal government to treat water and distribute water. It is entirely the responsibility of states, and that is why the federal government does not run a water board. The only water board we have is FCT Water Board, and it's under FCT administration. So we have this National Urban Water Sector Reform Program. I think we're on the third tranche now. It's the third phase. It's supporting states to corporatize, to improve their capacity to be able to do proper billing, and all that towards effective cost recovery. Make sure that people have the capacity to run these plants efficiently, and so on and so forth. So we are doing that. Beyond that, I think the states themselves, like I said, and should understand that they need to invest. And I'm very happy what I had mentioned, what they're doing with respect to, trying to get these people to be conscious of planning. One of the things we also try to encourage states is to plan. And in fact, this urban water scheme that I was mentioning, the facility that we're trying to get from the World Bank, one of the conditions that will be there for the state to participate is it must show at least a 15 to 30-year water supply plan for that state. Because they're not even planning anything. They just drill borehole here, drill borehole there. You cannot provide water, you cannot provide sanitation if you don't have the baseline data and you don't know the population projection and so on of people that are going to be involved. Now, the challenge is not from government. At some national level, there's quite a bit of it because I have seen, I wouldn't say, not in recent time, but in the past, I witnessed a campaign where an aspirant running for governorship election was telling the people, if you vote for me, you don't have to pay for water, that water will be free, you know. So people have the psyche. There's also the cultural aspect of it. They think this, not all water, well, all water comes from the skies, but not the water you get from your tap is not from the sky. As such, at the end of the day, it gets treated, it's conveyed, there's energy cost, there's human cost, you know, there's cost for chemicals and so on and so forth, and reagents. So people need to understand that. The most serious challenge, I think, is from some of these human rights organizations or unfortunately, some NGOs that have taken it as a crusade that water is a human right. I think they've taken that idea too far. Yes, the water is a human right, so they're against any aspect of privatization or commercialization. We're not going to privatize our dams. We own them. But people have to pay for the water. So we are looking forward to, in the future, if we have our bill in place, we have a strong regulation, that will encourage the private sector to come in and help maybe run water schemes, invest their money in treatment facilities, in paying for the diesel, for the energy, expanding the network, and so on and so forth, so that they can recover costs. All we're after is efficiency. We're not after exploiting people. We just want a situation where there's a mechanism in place to ensure that water gets to the people in enough quantity and to the good quality.
Honorable Minister, we'll return to you. We have seen Zahid Georgie, who's Chief of Water, Sanitation and Hygiene of UNICEF, is back on the screen, and our engineers indicate to us that the Skype connection is okay now. Zahid Georgie, sorry we lost you. We've had to keep you on hold, as it were, for the greater part of this conversation. I did mention that we've also had the benefit of your presence in our Abuja studios sometime in the past. Quite clearly, the launch of WASH by the Buhari administration was a signification of the government's determination to ensure that the entire value chain and the benefit due to the end users and everything else, of course, takes proper hold. But from the UNICEF perspective, what has been your experience with the WASH sector? Are we on course? And if there are challenges, what have those challenges been from your perspective?
Thank you for hosting me. The sector of WASH is quite complicated, and for us to be able to verify whether or not we are on track, I think the figures will speak for themselves. I mean, we use indicators, and the Honorable Minister has alluded to some of those indicators. We have the results of the recent National Outcome Routine Mapping, which were validated less than a week ago. And we talk about figures in water of 70% access and 44% access in sanitation. Now, these are the MDG standards. We know the Sustainable Development Goals have put in some more strict standards. So when we do the SDG quality kind of indicators, the coverage of water drops down to only 14%, because the SDG talks about availability of water within the household 24/7 and water that is free from contaminants. When we talk about sanitation, the figure goes down to 21%. Now, again, these are national, global figures. If we dig deeper, and lots of the problems have been alluded to. So what matters also is the per capita share. How much does each person get? And again, Norm reveals that this number stands at only 9 liters per capita per day, which is minimal. I mean, it's in fact less than what we aim at in an emergency case. So 9 liters per capita is not sufficient. We dig deeper into the quality of the water that is being provided. Water at household level, I mean, 63% of the water that is used at household level is contaminated. So these are all details, and we should, dig deeper to be able to analyze those problems and then find proper solutions for them. Now, we've been talking about the responsibilities. I mean, we talk about state authorities and federal authorities. The wash sector is a sector that the entire community, the entirety of Nigeria is responsible for. And here I want to specify the roles and responsibilities of the people themselves. The Honorable Minister alluded to that. It's a right for people to have water, but maintaining this water, making sure that whatever systems are put in place are always functional is definitely the responsibility of the people. Making sure that this water is not contaminated. Again, ending open defecation. 23%, almost 1/4 of the Nigerian population practice open defecation. And open defecation will lead into contamination of water sources. Now, functionality, it's between 64% to 74% of water systems are functional. So we almost have 1/4 or more than that of the installed capacity that is out of order, coupled with low capacity to do proper operations and maintenance. In this big country, everything that is done in 1 year is lost against the inability to keep those systems running. With this big country, I mean, we've seen the levels of coverage have been stagnant. They are not moving. And if Nigeria wants to meet the SDGs, things will have to be done in a faster pace. Now, a lot has been said on increased budgetary allocation. This is correct. Nigeria, when it comes to allocation, it ranks lower than the average of Africa. And this is the biggest economy in Africa. But this is not the only thing to do. The water sector needs things that are beyond the technicalities, beyond the engineering aspect. We need leadership at state and community level. Leaders will need to talk to their people and tell them of the importance of having wash facilities sustained and maintained. Provide the initial capital investment, but then encourage people to form their committees so that they are in charge of their systems. And at the same time, be able to construct their own latrines. Household latrines are the responsibilities of the people. The states and the state government is responsible for making sure that public places have latrines and installations. But at the household level, this is definitely the responsibility of the population. And without the population coming forward, population, we're talking about 200 million. This is a superpower if they are not fully engaged. And here we need the media to play an important role. They have to be there. Leadership, media, raising awareness of people, telling them defecating in the open will lead to diseases. Their children will not go to school. There will be lots of losses financially within the family. These are things that will need to happen simultaneously. Achieving SDGs is not easy. It's a challenge. But again, there are lots of opportunities within Nigeria. Again, the Honorable Minister spoke about the availability of renewable water resources, 1,800 cubic meters per person. This is a big figure. In the globe, only 4% of the waters are suitable for drinking. And Nigeria happens to be one of those lucky countries where those resources are available, but they need to be put in proper use. And this is what we need to focus on.
Thank you so much. Never before has the emphasis on water been highlighted than now. With COVID-19 just around, hitting us with the shocking, numbers going up every day, and most communities do not have access to water.
That's true. I mean, this is a problem. Water as a sector, water is responsible. I mean, it's an important component when it comes to mitigation measures, risk mitigation. I mean, the advice that we get and the messages that come with regards to COVID is people will need to wash their hands with soap under running water for a minimum of 20 seconds. If people don't have access to water, I mean, whatever message we are sending will not sink at all. And this is something that will need to be paid attention to. Again, I want to re-emphasize here that the important thing, making progress, filling in the gaps in the coverage of water is important. But there are some other low-hanging fruits. These are the systems that do exist but are not functional. We need to make sure that sustainability is an integral component of every water system that is put in place, so that we perpetuate the life of those investments. Because anything that we do right now, if we fill in a gap today, in 3 years, if this system is not properly maintained, it will become a gap again. And we will continue to remain in the same spot in terms of coverage. So this is an area that we need to focus on. It needs to happen quickly. This is a priority because it will make sure that we revive existing investments that have been made. And then there is a need of an accelerated effort at the states level, coupled with leadership, coupled with increased budgetary allocation, coupled with the work that could be done by the private sector, which is very important, very vibrant private sector that we have in Nigeria. It has to be endeared to the sector. The enabling environment will have to be provided so that they can come forth and they can contribute with their efficiency and effectiveness in helping construct and maintain the system so that we could progress steadily to achieve the SDGs.
Okay, Zahid, Georgie, thank you very much. Of course, we'll return to you near the end of this conversation segment. And then the other guests, of course, who are still with us in Jos and two in the Abuja studios. We're going to have to take a short break. I think, Juma, the point has been made that yes, you need to get the private sector involved in the corporatization of the water sector. And getting the private sector involved certainly will go beyond this Meruwa phenomenon and those who are operating water tankers all around the country. We'll take a short break now.
What be this coronavirus thing? Now, true?
You see this coronavirus will be COVID-19. Now the whole world palaver. And it don't they kill many people for China, Italy, UK, US, Spain, and even for other countries them.
Okay, what can be the reason why they say make everybody stand up for house?
Now because if they waka pium go carry them from person we don't get them, you go carry come give your family them. Now so the thing take they kill other people for other countries.
Okay, what can be that social distancing self?
You see social distance. Now make we no come close because this thing now from air and touch now with the contact them. We supposed they at least 6 foot away from each other every time.
So okay, no be only to wash your hand and to sanitize them alone.
Make we not take this washing of hand thing take play, but make we come together, join hand as we take pursue Ebola, pursue this coronavirus. Make we be each other be keepers now.
We're here for small businesses, the local entrepreneurs. We're here for the smiles, the good times, for those who would come from far. Put your business on the map with Visa. Where you shop matters.
Nigerians, signs. Coronavirus is dangerous. It can kill. When you see this sign, high fever, cough, shortness of breath, drowsiness, pneumonia, don't panic, don't hide, don't embark in self-medication. Promptly visit the nearest medical facility. Report all cases to the nearest hospital. Prevention is key. Avoid contact with infected persons. Avoid crowded areas as much as possible. Wash your hands regularly. Use hand sanitizers. Your life is precious. Stay alive. Live long. Live right. This message is sponsored by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture and the Nigerian Film Corporation. Nigerian Film Corporation, powering possibility.
As a strong immune system increases the chances of victims surviving COVID-19, a corruption-free society creates opportunities for citizens to thrive and prosper. Build your immunity. Stop corruption now. Report all acts of corruption to ICPC on this toll-free number 0800 22 55 4272. This message is brought to you by ICPC and NTA.
The number of the COVID-19 cases in Nigeria is increasing daily, with many more tests ongoing. The battle of testing, isolating, treating, and attending to the affected persons rests heavily on the shoulders of our health workers, constantly putting their lives on the line and at risk to contain this virus, save and protect the lives of millions of Nigerians. To these health workers, we at the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, on behalf of millions of Nigerians, say a big thank you for all that you have done and are doing. To the security agencies enforcing the lockdown and every other frontliner, we say thank you for putting your lives on the line to save ours. There is no amount of words that can quantify our gratitude. Thank you. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network.
All right, welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the NTA. We have a number of tweets that have come in from our viewers. We'll quickly go through those tweets and then return to our guests. We have this from Isa Hasi, that's OOO Muhammad. It says the only water the masses of this country can visibly access is the one in the rivers. I think that's an exaggeration, by the way.
On Mobola, on Bab's tweets, there has been several water dam projects embarked upon by the Buhari administration. Central Ogbea Regional Water Supply at Otoke, former President Jonathan's country home. Another 11.8 billion Zaria second phase water project was launched on August 21st, 2019. We can do more because water is life.
All right, we have this from Dada Stephen. It says, let me take this from Adejumo Paul. It says, at the federal level, the common man definitely does not feel the federal government contribution in the area of water supply. It is high time the states took over the supply of water completely. In return, increase federal allocations to states. Now, Adejumo, if you've been listening to the Honorable Minister of Water Resources and indeed the comments of the other guests, then you would know that what you have just indicated here is not correct. The federal government provides bulk water as well as water supply schemes, and it is the responsibility of the state governments to cover the last mile by giving you water in your homes. That is the responsibility of the state governments.
Yes. And Stephen Bond 07 tweets, most rural areas have no access to drinkable water. The urban areas depend on poreholes, wells, and pump machines. So the Water Resource Department is nearly non-existent.
Now, Raji Afiz Abidemi, there is no access to water in our area in Ibadan or your state, Nigeria, and this has been so for the past 10 years. In which part of Ibadan are you? You didn't indicate that.
And Idris Yunusa tweets, Buhari Olufai-led administration break the jinx of Zaria water projects. Now we are drinking clean water in Zaria City Metropolitan.
Bravo.
It's white projects during past regime. God bless Kaduna State.
Chris Simeon, the people at the local level do not have access to potable water. Some still drink water from streams and rivers which are polluted. And that's the reason waterborne diseases are common.
Nuhu Mohammed tweets, it's not easy to fix water system in Nigeria. Government can set solid foundation to meet with the challenges. Many dams are available that are not receiving government attention. For we to get it right, effective attention is needed. Kudos to Minister for these developments.
Now, this is from Usman Banu Kantu. Water is key to driving agriculture. However, construction of dams is not given the prominence it deserves. Again, this is not correct. We have over 240 dam projects in the country. So the sector needs to be repositioned for better results. Exactly what are you looking at?
Yes, Akeju or Lukbaju tweets, the potential of dams and indeed water resources have been well documented in Nigeria. Yet we're still poor in the optimum management and utilization of water resources due to governance structure. Better synergy with agri, power and other economic subsectors is all we need.
Eno Ayuk, it says many states in Nigeria, especially in the south, have no functional public water supply systems, not to talk of dams for irrigation, rather boreholes which are built by individuals without government supervision are the main source for which citizens depend.
First is Akimboewa tweets, sadly, despite federal government's effort to improve water supply, millions of Nigerians still depend on polluted water. PMB's administration should come up with pollution safeguards for our drinking water sources. Also, there should be an effective oversight of millions of miles of our streams.
Mutana Farouk, potable water is still a mirage to the vast majority of Nigerians, especially those in rural areas.
And Comrade Alhaji Ngala tweets, most of our rural areas have no access to potable drinking water. They are suffering.
Abuz, what are state governments doing with regard to water? All the projects we are hearing about are all federal government projects.
Ibrahim Abdulsalam Bello tweets, the entire water system of the country needs complete overhauling, although this administration has shown commitment in the revamping of some dams in the country for easy access to clean water. More has to be done in this regard to bring clean water to our houses.
All right, those are the tweets that we can accommodate in the meantime. Let's bring in Evelyn Mary very quickly. Evelyn, I mean, on the basis of your mapping of the country and interaction with subnational entities, what do you think can be done much more effectively so that the benefits of the downstream sector of water supply can be harnessed and then the end users have the tremendous benefits that will arise from that rather than the kind of situation that we have at the moment?
As I already mentioned, you need to have effective planning. When you have planning, you know what it is that you need to do. You would have mapped the assets within your state. You know what you need to replace, what you need to expand, how much you need for operations and maintenance, and then you can begin from there. You need to ensure that those who man those utilities have the capacity. I was told that the average age of people working in state water agencies is 50. You need to bring in younger people who come with innovative ideas, new thinking in the sector. You need to have the citizens play their role. The issue of sabotaging water facilities, citizens have not yet understood that they have a role, that they have the power to be able to monitor and take action and tell government, what's happening in the sector. The communities that you mentioned have not made the connection, with the fact that if they take action, they can actually hold those who are sabotaging the facilities to account. And then you need to have a commercial approach to everything, to water and sanitation. Part of the support that we provide to the state in developing water policy is to give them a model for private-public partnerships. Who does what? Who treats water, who distributes, who meters and then collects tariffs and then returns money to government. If you have those kinds of arrangements in place, it means that you have made the sector much more efficient. The same with sanitation. If government just, makes the bylaws and provides the standards for operation, the private sector can come in and map the households where you need to put in toilets, make sure you produce toilets that are affordable, looking at how you manage the containment, the emptying, the treatment of fecal sludge, and turning that into from waste to wealth.
I'm sorry to interject. When we're talking about subnational entities, we have two major issues that arise with the governance of subnational entities. With due respect, the point has been made that we have emperors at the state level. And then you also have the emasculation of local governments. So when you say, therefore, that you are interacting with state governments, from your experience, who is the go-to person that you say, fine, you want to get ahead with planning, you want to get ahead with the systematic organization and management of water schemes? Must it be the governor, or
The governor must show leadership, must demonstrate political will. What we do prior to entering any state is what we call a political economy analysis. It tells you where the power base lies. It tells you who has power, who's going to sabotage your effort, and then you identify your entry point. It might be the church that will be your entry point to read the riot act to people who are sabotaging the sector because they hold moral authority over them. It might be the State Ministry of Water Resources. It might be the small town agency. It might be the RWASA. In our experience, a lot of the work we've done have been the RWASAs. UNICEF has done an excellent job in strengthening RWASAs and professionalizing them so that they're able to get their work done. So your PEA will tell you where the problem lies. If you don't do a PEA, you can enter and engage the wrong person. But the person you need to engage might be maybe a party leader within the state, and bring them on board what the issues are, make them a WASH champion, and then they become your partner in the state and remove the obstacles that are there. PEA is key. Once you do that, you know what your entry point is and what the issues are.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll now go to Zaid in Canada. Let's talk about the critical areas that needs to be looked into so that we can be able to achieve the 2020 targets. What critical areas should we look into?
This has already been mentioned. As we said, whatever political will there is at the federal level, it needs to be replicated at the subnational level, at the state level. And then political will means for a governor, for example, to hold authorities responsible for setting plans, expanding services, and at the same time, and this is very, very important, to show leadership. There will need to be open communication channels between the beneficiaries, the people, the communities, the community leaders, with the leaders of the state, to explain why the country has gone into this phase of emergency. What is it that needs to be done to overcome those problems? What do people need to have their latrines constructed? And then at the same time, the media will need to play a role of raising the awareness of the population of why do they need to have their water systems maintained, why do they need to have their latrines constructed, all the benefits that come with that. As I said, this is a shared responsibility, and for a country as big as Nigeria, we cannot hold one entity responsible. Things will need to be explained, they will need to happen at the same time, and with that, we could create an acceleration in the pace within which the progress towards the SDGs happen. Otherwise, the figures will continue to be stagnant as they are right now.
All right, Zaid, thank you very much. Let's go over to Jos. Sahad Bello, tell us something, again, from your general experience. How can we ensure political value reorientation so that state governments recognize the inherent benefits in available water supply, the emphasis on infrastructure, on roads, and all kinds of so-called visible things? How do we bring water into all of these cases? Because you build good roads in the urban areas, by the time you are supposed to have reticulation, those roads that you have constructed will have to be broken and opened up for you to lay the pipes. How do we get state governments, to key into this and recognize that indeed water is life and that it has a knock-on effect, more especially on health?
Thank you very much. The issue you raised is very apt and cogent. I think what we need to do is to engage the government and the civil society organizations so that we can reach out to the general public. The essence of water is very clear to everybody, and the state government should prioritize water delivery. They should make it a point of priority, just like we take the leadership from the federal government. The federal government realizes that the water sector is actually in the dwindling stage and it declares state of emergency, that is enough to tell you that something is wrong, and therefore we encourage states to also make it a priority, revisit their policies, where necessary, declare state of emergency in the sector, and then put in the necessary facility. The area you mentioned in terms of obstruction of service due to either road construction or to other developmental efforts, that must be properly done at the inception of thinking of citing a project, so that necessary impact analysis will be done, so that we do the needful before we commence destructing or obstructing efficient delivery of water to communities due to road construction or other developmental projects. If that is done in consultation with the sector, the Ministry of Water Resources in the state, I think it will go a long way in reducing the instances of relocation of pipes or abrupt vandalization of networks. I think that is what the state needs to do, to include the Ministry of Water Resources whenever they are conceiving an idea that has to do with development, and we give them the guide, the map, the road map, the guide for where our facility are laid, so that we can do the needful without obstructing normal service delivery.
Okay, thank you so much. Now back in the studio, we need to have your closing thought. 5 years down the line, we still have 3 years to go. What is the projection?
Well, for me, I wish state governments would see things the way we see them. The water sector is not a 4-year issue. It's a generational issue. What you need is a long-term plan for you to do your bit and move on, and make sure the plan is there for others to come and continue from where you left, because populations will continue to grow, the demand will continue to grow. So we, in my ministry, we have a 50-year roadmap, 2016 to 2030, aligned to our National Water Resources Master Plan and aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals. I hope going forward that states will look at things the same way. This issue of planning is a very critical issue. But it's not only about planning for water. You talked about infrastructure. It's also about urban planning, for instance. There is no synergy. There is even no plan. That's why you see slums growing everywhere. And that's another factor. As long as your cities are not planned, you can't even plan the water system. So it's a comprehensive thing. It's an integrated approach. State governments should begin to see things. We should begin to see things the way we should. And I hope that governments will stop seeing a horizon of 4 years, stop looking at the next election, but should be thinking about the next generation. You know, the same way that we're looking at it at federal level. If we all work like that and think like that, we're in the same, operating on the same wavelength, we'll get there. A lot needs to be done, but I hope governments going forward will have their plans in place and look beyond a very shallow horizon and look much, much further.
Okay, thank you so much, Honorable Minister Suleiman Adamu, Minister of Water Resources. It's been a pleasure having you on the program.
Thank you very much.
Country Director, Water Aid, Evelyn Mere, it's a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
At least we have 2 ladies in the house.
Thank you.
And then Saad Bello, Honorable Commissioner for Water Resources and Energy, Plateau State, thank you so much for joining us. And Chief of Water, Sanitation and Hygiene, UNICEF, Zaid Jurji, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Canada. It's been a pleasure.
All right, so that's it for us today at Good Morning Nigeria. The program returns tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, stay safe and be well. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Juma Yusuf. Do have a great day. And remember to adhere to personal hygiene protocols, observe the physical distancing, and ensure you stay safe.